You know what really makes us mad is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to punklottopod. I'm your co-host Justin Hensley, and Dylan's not here today. So instead, I reached out to a good friend that we've had on the show many times in the past, but not very recently. Joining me today is good friend Cory. Cory, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Do you remember the last time you were on?
I only remember because the only time I ever use Skype is to talk to you. And the last call that we had was in February. So I think we talked about the measure in February.
Okay, so that was this year. Okay.
Yeah, and I only remember it being this year also because I am a chronic taker-outer of records and not putter-awayer of records. And so I remember when we talked about the measure, I pulled out the album to look at the liner notes and art, and it was on top of my turntable for probably a few months after that. and it was in our current living situation.
You still have it out now. It's just sitting there.
It might still be out actually. No, I think I refiled some stuff this summer.
Yeah, I haven't played anything on my turntable in quite a few months just because like we have way too many cats, and so it just turns into like you put a record on and they're just like sitting on top of it and they're trying to like swat at it underneath the glass, and they keep knocking one of the speakers off the shelf, and it's just like this thing's gonna break before I've had it 2 years.
Maybe they're just trying to DJ.
Yeah.
Maybe they like better music than you. Give them a chance.
Yeah. Well, let's see what they put on. It's all deep house trance. But yeah, what's new with you? We haven't had you on in a while.
Yeah, no, I mean a lot has changed in the world, I suppose. You've become a hockey boy in the time since we last talked.
It's true.
I was looking for the first instance of hockey coming up in our texts this morning, and it first came up on April 7th. And then 2 days later, on April 9th, you texted me, "Uh-oh, I think I might be turning into a hockey boy."
Yeah, I went to that one local game through my class, and then I was like, this is so much fun. But I'd always suspected that I might be one of those like punk and hardcore guys who turns into hockey guys, because that's a thing. That's a trajectory that people take.
Yeah. Because
it's like one of the mainstream sports that feels kind of alternative. You know, it's not football, it's not basketball, baseball.
I think that every punk who gets into sports somehow tries to make that justification about their particular sport, because, you know, for a long time, I think the stereotype was that baseball was the pop punk sport.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because to Say Anything, wrote that album about it.
Oh, I don't know that band, really. I know the name, but I don't know the band or the album about baseball.
I think it's called Baseball, even.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, that's modern baseball you're thinking of.
Oh, yeah.
But
what are the hockey punk bands? The Hextalls?
Are Knuckle Puck a hockey punk band?
Are they?
I don't know. Their name is Knuckle Puck, though.
Yeah, it is. They're like that wave of pop punk that I have no connection to whatsoever, though.
We're too old for it.
Yeah. Except now they're like hitting 30, so
they're gonna be too old for it soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Hockey guy. Carolina plays tomorrow night. Go Canes. But you're a basketball boy.
I'm a basketball boy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Raptors play tonight. The NBA had the night off yesterday because they respect democracy. And
really?
Yeah, didn't. I don't know if that's the reason. But there were no games scheduled last night. I'm connecting the dots and imagining that they respect the institution of American electoral politics.
Well, I mean, I will say though that the NBA does have some of the most active kind of like politically involved people, I feel like.
Yeah, they have been, I mean, in coordination with their players union, I think the NBA has, especially over the last couple of years, organized pretty effectively around Black Lives Matter and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that they have, as a league, generally tried to position themselves as socially conscious in some ways. And I don't know, this is probably really boring for anyone who doesn't pay attention to basketball, but fail in other ways. There has been an unfortunate anti-Semitism scandal afflicting the Brooklyn Nets in particular for the last couple of weeks, and so that nobody is perfect, and I don't want to say that any kind of corporate entity is above criticism, but yeah, in general, I think especially compared to some of the other professional sports, the NBA has at least tried to advance social justice issues, but still lots of work to do.
Oh yeah, of course.
We don't have to talk about sports.
Yeah, it's a new sports talk show. It's a new format.
It is.
Except we don't watch the same sport. We're just like, well, my team does this. What's yours do? Yeah. Well, we're happy you're here and filling in for Dylan, who is hosting our brother and our mother. They're in town visiting LA, so he's I don't want to try and record.
You couldn't get them on the pod?
My mom once called the show boring.
She's not wrong.
She's like, I don't know what you're talking about any other time I've listened to it. It's like, but we're your children. You're supposed to support us. Just download every episode so I get the numbers and that's it. You don't have to listen.
Did she do that?
No. I do think our youngest brother, he listens, and he said sometimes he'll like put it on in the car with her, and it's like, she doesn't care. You don't have to do this.
Yeah.
My wife doesn't listen. I don't think she's listened to a single episode. So
you should get her on the pod.
Yeah.
Everyone can be converted by being a guest.
Yeah. You force them. At least put it in your iPhone.
Yeah.
Give me those numbers. Yeah. So we did something a little different when it came to choosing what we're going to talk about today. I don't want to name the record yet, but I think you asked me, you're like, what is there an era that's been kind of underrepresented on the show? And I said, well, the 2010s, because I don't think anyone wants to reminisce to a time period where they were an adult already. So like, it's not one of the most popular eras for us to talk about. And you were like, let's do that.
Well, yeah. I wasn't necessarily thinking about it, though, with reminiscing in mind or nostalgia in mind. And we'll talk about the album that we're going to talk about, obviously, in much more detail soon. But when I think of this album, I don't think of it as a nostalgia listen at all. It's something that's still very much an active listen for me. And I hope that's the case for others too who are listening to this and appreciating that. But maybe that's a question for you about your show. Do you think of what you and Dylan do here as an exercise in nostalgia?
For me and Dylan, no. Because the way the show was originally set up, like the point was to kind of force ourselves to listen to things that we maybe wouldn't have listened to before. And I think though some guests tend to approach it from, oh, I loved that album, and that's why we talk about some of the albums they talk about. So I think it's, for us, not so much, but for the guest, maybe it is.
Do you find that happens more with older albums, or are people just maybe choosing albums that either mean or have meant something to them in the past, and that's why it goes that way? Like, or is there any correlation between the age of the album and whether a discussion kind of veers toward nostalgia or not?
I think it depends on the person and their age and when the album came out. Like, it definitely is a couple factors that go into it. I'd say, usually the first thing I ask whenever I'm trying to get someone to come on for the first time to get an idea of like what era they're most comfortable with talking about. I usually ask them like, what decade are you like most interested in talking about something from? And most people tend to say like 90s or 2000s. And then other people will say 80s because they're a little bit older maybe. But yeah. So I think it's more of, okay, well, you're comfortable with this era. I'll give you a year from this time. And then I think when they come back multiple times, that's when it gets a little bit more like, let's talk about this because I want to talk about it, versus well, here's a record I like and know well.
Yeah. No, I guess, I don't know. I'm interested in thinking about that I don't know what the opposite of nostalgia is other than something being an active part of your life. I don't there needs to be a better word for nostalgia. But I'm interested in thinking about music not as nostalgia, but music as being, a soundtrack to a life or a soundtrack to particular experiences, and I can see how it would really easily veer toward nostalgia. I don't know. For me, that's less interesting though.
Yeah, and it also depends on the way the conversation goes. With some people,
Sure.
It's purely like these are the things about the record that they really speak to me still, and really mean a lot to me. But then other people, it's like, well, let me tie this into the point in my life when I heard it for the first time.
Yeah. I think maybe I bristle a little bit at nostalgia because I worry about it just being like it just becomes really, and this will maybe make more sense when we talk about today's album and what this album does for me and what I think this band that we're going to talk about does so effectively. I just worry that nostalgia just slips too easily into like over romanticizing particular eras or particular pasts when you're actually in those times, they don't always feel the way that you then reminisce about them later.
Yeah, that's certainly true. It is hard because like when you try and think of the context of when something came out, I think that's how you wind up doing that, which me and Dylan are all about, like the context of stuff.
Yeah, I think it would be hard. I mean, every time I think, well, I don't know, I guess I can't say this for certain, but the times that I've been on the show with you, Dylan, aside from when I've been assigned an album that I haven't heard before,
Yeah,
the things that I talk about are very much not albums that I listened to as an 18-year-old and then haven't listened to since.
Yeah,
they're albums that I've grown and changed alongside.
I do think most of the people, whenever they pick something, they may have heard it for the first time when they were younger, but it is something that they go back to. I don't think
I'm not
much like that.
I'm also not trying to criticize your other guests and their approach.
Oh.
I'm just interested in picking apart that idea of what music does and how music continues to live alongside you.
Yeah, because I also think it depends on what the person's approach is too. Like, I feel like musicians have a different approach than people who I like to think of them as like the professional appreciators, like the people who write, who podcast, who run labels and stuff like that. I feel like they're more interested in talking about either a wider variety of things, whereas with like musicians, I feel like they tend to go with either something that meant something when they were younger or something that's just like a general influence on the way they play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so it's definitely different.
Yeah. What year are we talking about today?
Yeah, so you wanted to talk about the band, and so I was like, okay, well, let's look at what years they put out records in, and I was like, okay, well, the only other time we've talked about this year was once, and it is 2016. And before we get to the actual album you selected, what do you remember about 2016? It was only, what is that?
That
8
is
years ago?
No, 6 years ago.
Yes, you're right. I did 6 plus 2 in my brain. I don't know why I did that, but
yeah, well, you and I were both talking before we started recording about the messiness of this particular year, at least represented in the Rate Your Music charts, which you used to at least frame part of the discussion. And to be honest with you, from this list, not very much is standing out as being important to me. A lot of these albums I remember. I'm surprised at maybe some of their placements, although I guess that's kind of what you get when you are relying on, user generated content to populate these kinds of lists. But you've got to get to, I don't know, I didn't count, but pretty far down before I find something that I am starting to be interested in. I mean, I kind of liked that. I kind of like that modern baseball album, Holy Ghost, but it wore out for me pretty quickly. I love the cover art of that Savages album, Adore Life, with just the big fist in the center of it. What else is on here that's interesting to me? White Lung have some interesting moments. I think that this year when Paradise came out is when White Lung played Fest, and my wife said that White Lung was the worst band she'd ever seen. She had such a bad time. I think she may have even left and just stood outside the Atlantic.
That's so weird. Why? Like, what is it about them that was like so awful for her?
Just couldn't take it. Hated the stage presence. Hated the vocals. I'm sorry, White Lung, if you're listening to this, but
yeah, big listeners.
It's her perspective.
I do like that record. I like White Lung. I've recently discovered that I like that band, and they have a new one coming out in December.
I didn't know they were still a band. Okay.
It's gonna be their last record, so it's like one of those, like, it's like a farewell essentially.
Got it. Yeah. At 37 on this list is Cody by Joyce Manor, which has like a really good string of opening tracks before kind of falling off. But yeah, I like that one. I don't know. Is there anything standing out to you from this list? For me, I had to go to my record collection and see what I was listening to in 2016, and remembering that there was some good stuff there. You had a Katie Ellen 7-inch that I really like. Probably the big one that you and I would share interest in is John K. Samson's last full-length Winter Wheat.
Yeah.
Tenement had that 12-inch that was really good, and they also had, I think, their second singles collection that year. There was a cool Erica Frias and Spoonboy project, Somnia, which I think might have been, I haven't checked this either, but I think it might have been one of the last Rumbletown Records releases. Dead to Me had their I Want to Die in Los Angeles 7-inch. I remember picking that up. It was I don't know if it had been announced or if it was a surprise release at Fest, but I remember picking it up there. One of my favorite records in my collection of the last 10 years or so is this band CC Dust. And CC Dust, I guess I would best describe it as like electronic based. I don't know. It's like abrasive synth pop, I guess. It's kind of like electronic music or synth based music, but played by punks. And this has probably only happened to me a handful of times, but I was in a record store when it was on, and I had to stop and ask the clerk what was playing because I was so taken by the opening track. And I grabbed that immediately. And then their singer, Mary Jane Dunphy, has gone on to do a bunch of really cool other things, including the same year she sang in a more like garagey punk band called Vex out of Olympia that had a really cool 12-inch in 2016.
Yeah, that's the thing that I don't know that I've ever experienced, like being in a record store and they were playing something and I was like, I have to get this.
Yeah.
Usually I'm in a record store and I go, is this guy to buy Voices? Because I don't like it. And it usually is.
Or it's like music for airports, some kind of music for airports.
Or it's always this
style.
Like world music record where you're just like, do you actually like this? Or are you just putting it on because you work in a record store? I think working in a record store does ruin some people's taste in music. It makes them like listen to the most like, well, this is extremely obscure and it's hard to enjoy. So I'm going to pretend that's my personality. And
and I don't want anybody in my shop today.
Yeah, that could be part of it too.
Record stores rule.
Yeah.
What's the worst record store you've ever been to?
Oh, boy.
No, wait, we don't. Maybe we should.
Okay, how about we just don't name names? Usually to me, the worst record stores are the ones with like, everything is expensive to the point where it's like, well, I don't really want to pay $35 for this new $20 record, you know, or the shops that are like, we blended all the new and the used together. I hate that more than anything. It's like,
yeah, that definitely sucks.
separate them, please. I know sometimes it's space is the reason why they're that way, but
Yeah.
I've definitely been in shops where I was like, oh boy, a record store, and then I walk out going, I wish I didn't even go in there.
I won't name this store either. Although anyone who's been to Kingston, Ontario, will probably know immediately what I'm talking about. And I don't really feel too bad about this because I think that this is known. This is the deal when you go to this place. There is this store there in downtown Kingston that is basically known for being a mess. That it's one of those places where, you know, it's built up this lore around it about just being a disaster. There's no filing system of any sort. As you're saying, the new and the used is mixed in. I don't remember the number of records that the owner claims to have there, but it was like, you know, 100,000 records in there. And also he had some barn somewhere that had 100,000 more. And none of it was good. It's one of those places also where the claim is, you know, it's a disaster, but if you ask, he knows where everything is. That is not true. You do not know where everything is in a pile of 100,000 records. I asked for a couple things and he had no idea. Sir, this is the legend that people are crafting about you. At least try and live up to it. And the aisles were, I don't know, it was almost like people enjoyed a bad experience. It's like the record store equivalent of one of those restaurants where the waiters swear at you and you have a bad time. But I hated it so much. I took a video of it, I think, because I had such a bad time and I needed other people to see.
You did just remind me though of two record stores near me that I didn't even think about. One had the worst filing system I've ever seen for a record store. So you know how whenever it's like a solo artist, you usually file it by their last name?
Yep.
Well, this store was, if it was a band with a 2-word name, they were filing it by the second name. So it was, if you wanted to find Black Sabbath, you'd have to go look at Sabbath Black. Or Deep Purple, Purple Deep. Like, it was just like, you don't know how filing works. You learned the trick about solo artists and applied it to bands, which doesn't make any sense.
So my wife definitely helped reorganize my records a few years ago because she realized that I had been filing solo artists alphabetically by first name.
Yeah.
Which I guess is the opposite of what you're saying, but yeah. Anyway.
That I understand because it's literally the first letter. And it makes sense. And also sometimes you don't know when an artist's name is just a band name. It's not like, you're not going to go Pop Iggy for Iggy Pop, you know, I feel like, because it's not, either one are his real names. So like,
yeah. Or
those bands where it's like it's named after a person, but no one in that band is that person's name, you know?
I'm imagining an esoteric filing system where Iggy Pop is actually filed under James, what's his name? James Osterberg.
Yeah. Though that does remind me, one time I was in a record store and a guy came in and he said, what would Killing Joke be filed under, K or J? and the guy running the store was like, his name's not Mr. Joke. It's
his name's not Killing either.
Yeah. But the other store that I've thought of, it's a store that has no prices on anything. And he will price it based on how you act when you bring it to him. So if you're just like, how much is this? He'll be like, $5. But if you're like, how much is this? And then he'll be like, oh, you're excited for it. $15. You know, it's just
it's a vibes based record store.
Yeah. And it sucks. There's nothing good in there either. So it's just like, these should all be $1.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
2016.
Yeah, what were you listening to in 2016?
Yeah, 2016. So like I looked at this list and I was like, well, the only thing on here that I was probably really, really into was that
Jeff
Pup
Rosenstock.
record. Yeah. Pups, The Dream Is Over, and the AJJ record, The Bible 2. Though I don't love The Bible 2. It's probably one of my least favorite records by them, but I wound up pulling up my my best of 2016 list that I made.
Yep.
and I look at it now and I go, why was that so high up there? That's weird. I guess if we're gonna look at stuff that I still really like.
What was your favorite album of that year? What did you say?
So that year I picked Mother Country Motherfuckers, which was Sarah Kirsch's final record, which record rules. Like, I love that album. So I would probably still keep that one in the top 10. But then I had like number 2 was like a Marathon States record, and like nobody knows who Marathon States is, and I haven't listened to them much since then either. It's just like, I was really into that record.
Okay.
I had like the Adult Magic EP on there. I still love that one. Dark Blues, Start of the World, John K. Samson. And yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of solid stuff on here, but then there's other stuff on here. I'm like, why did I rank that RDT record so high?
Right.
You know, like, oh, I see multiple canceled bands on here too, so that's really fun. Like, you like seeing that.
You have problematic taste.
Yeah. One's a big one. We all pretended to like them.
Which one?
Oh, you know the old problematic.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we don't need to name problematic bands. Sorry.
I've got it.
I forgot about the problematic part.
We approached this backwards, and you picked the album, and then I just assigned the year. So you asked me, what's underrepresented? I said 2010s, and you said that's great because I want to talk about Martha. And I said, all right, which one? And you said Blisters in the Pit of My Heart. Run down my stats on the band. They are from Pity Me, which is a village in Durham County, northeast England. England's weird.
Can you imagine being from a place called Pity Me? Like, already, what an incredible origin story. Yeah, we're from Pity Me. We're from a place called Pity Me.
And I'm sure it's like a tiny village too. Like, it has to be.
I think Durham itself is quite large, and I think Pity Me just, I don't know, is a village the same thing as a neighborhood?
I think it's slightly more official. Okay. Like, it's not like, like a development, like that kind of thing. But they formed in, I think, 2011. I couldn't find an exact hard date. It just said early 2010s. And I was like, well, Rate Music said 2011, so we'll go with that. They released their self-titled EP in 2012 and followed that up with a series of singles and splits before releasing their first full-length album, Courting Strong, and then a couple more splits before we get to this album. So this is their second full-length album. It was released July 2016 on Dirt Nap Records in the United States and Fortuna Pop in the UK. And the personnel on this album is J.C. Cairns on guitar and vocals, Daniel Ellis on guitar and vocals, Naomi Griffin on bass and vocals, and Nathan Stevens Griffin on drums and vocals. Okay, usually the first thing I ask is what made you choose this album? So I guess it kind of still applies here. So what made you want to talk about a Martha record on here?
Yeah, well, I had been thinking a lot about them and also about your SEO, because in addition to releasing this beautiful, perfect album in 2016, they have continued to be a band since then, and just released an album 2 weeks ago, I think, or maybe a week, I don't remember. And yeah, so I thought it was timely. There might be some people who are getting into them now. They have a slightly wider reach, who may be interested in their back catalog and also might be listeners to your podcast. I don't know. Yeah, I was excited to talk about them. And you and I think, have had maybe small conversations about them in the past, but I don't actually know the full scope of your thoughts of this band. And I don't have criteria for this. It's it's been, I've made this claim about other bands before, and it shifts over time. I truly have no criteria for this. It is just a vibes-based statement as well. I think that I think that they're the best band in the world, and they're one of those bands that I don't understand why other people don't also feel that. That's not to say that they have just a small fan base. I think that they have a pretty wide reach, and I think that the people who love them tend to really love them. I don't know why more people don't love them. And I find oftentimes in our friendship that there are bands that I feel very strongly about that you don't, and I'm interested in pulling that apart. Like, not that I'm trying to convince you, because I don't think I can convince you, and I don't think you hate Martha, but I don't know your feelings about them, and I guess I just wanted to make you listen to an album to force you to reckon with your feelings about them.
Yeah. Well, let's take each of those kind of like piece by piece then. So, first of all, I appreciate you thinking of the algorithmic synergy of trying to talk about a relevant new release, hoping that channels some listens for inadvertent searches for Martha records.
I'm always thinking of you, my friend.
What's hot now? We have to talk about that.
And also, just to say, their new album is called "Please Don't Take Me Back," and it's incredible. And people still listen to it.
It was really recent. I think like 2 weeks. I think
it came out 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds right. Like maybe like Halloween weekend or something. But yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, I'm wrong. It came out last week. It was the October 28th, a week and a half ago.
Oh, okay. That still is Halloween weekend. I just don't even know what anything is anymore. Apparently.
What day is it? Where are we?
I have no frame of reference for what time it is anymore. I'm lost. I will be so glad when school is finished. But
yeah.
As far as like the why isn't Martha one of the biggest bands in the world, that's a really good point, because really, if you listening to this record and the type of music they're playing, the approach they have lyrically and ethically as a band, there is a ton there that I feel like should be gigantic as far as, at least in like the type of people who listen to punk music and like DIY sort of indie stuff. Like they really I feel like they should be much bigger than they actually are, based on how they sound and everything else around them.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there are probably some contributing factors to that. Two of them are academics, and the schedule of an academic is not always conducive to being in a full-time touring band. I'm sure that teaching and research takes up a significant amount of their time. I read a recent article where, they were talking about how it's nice to have this band as something to always come back to and always put your creative energy into it, while also maintaining other outlets for that creative energy. All of them are in other bands or involved in music in other ways. I don't know if JC is still running a label, but at one point he did run a label, and has also been involved in like tour management and touring with bands across Europe and supporting music and DIY communities in particular ways. And also, I don't know, just geographically, I would imagine it's really difficult to sustain any kind of momentum when you are maybe far away from other things. That's not to say that, again, Durham itself is a pretty large area in England, but it's probably not very easy to get over to larger markets like the US on a the semi-frequent basis needed when you combine that with busy schedules and lives outside of music. So like on one level I understand why they're not necessarily the biggest band in the world, but why are they not considered the best band in the world? That's a different question.
There's definitely, yeah, you're right. There is some restraints when it comes to being a UK based band, and I wonder what their breakdown is as far as their audience. Like, is their biggest audience in the UK, or do you think their biggest audience is actually here in the States?
Well, I don't know, because they have they have good distribution in the States. I don't know size wise. I know that their third record was on Big Scary Monsters, which has a pretty significant presence over in the UK, not as much in North America. All of their albums have been co-released by UK and American albums. Their first album was on Salinas, which we should spend some time talking about, and then their last 3 albums have been on Dirt Nap, North America side, and they've been on Fortuna Pop, Big Scary Monsters, and Specialist Subject now. So, they're working with labels of a decent size, with decent access to distribution and things like that. They just, as far as a physical presence over here in North America, they just haven't been to the US or Canada very much. I don't know if they've played a North American show since the time I saw them, which was, I think, in 2018. Maybe they played one more. I think they might have played a Dirt Nap weekend, maybe the year after, but even that might have been canceled. I don't quite remember. So yeah, I mean, just getting over here is tough, and we know that from our own histories in punk and DIY music that touring is often the best way to spread the word about your band. Word of mouth still matters.
Yeah, it's surprising.
Local shows still matter.
It's surprising to me, like, why that still matters so much whenever we are so interconnected, as far as like you can listen to any music from around the world at this point, and it still matters very much. Like, well, how much are they coming through? What size venues are they playing? Like, how well promoted are they? I mean, I guess promotion wise, they're probably not, like, Dirt Nap isn't the biggest label, especially in the States.
No, but it still has a good reach.
Does. Yeah. And like Salinas, they don't even have a Bandcamp. That's the weird thing about them still. Like, you have to be on their mailing list to know what they're putting out, I feel like, most of the time. And it's like, that's like almost too DIY to like the detriment of their self, like. Yeah.
I mean, I would love to spend a few minutes talking about Salinas too, because like, just what a label with such a good track record of putting out really interesting music, seemingly without concern for, overall sales numbers and things like that. Like, I think Salinas is really happy with the quality of the music, definitely a quality over quantity approach, and they tend to work probably with bands who are interested in putting out a 7-inch or putting out a 12-inch and then maybe moving on. There's I don't, trying to think back, there's not like a ton of career bands that I think about that maybe got their start on Salinas. A lot of one-off releases and things like that.
The Crutchfields, would they be like the only kind of?
Yeah, well, and maybe Warriors, because The Measure did a bunch of stuff on Salinas.
Yeah.
Those
probably are like the most well-known outside of Salinas bands, probably. Yeah. Telling me, did you see that new record from Salinas? And I'm like, no, I didn't know there was a new record from Salinas, because I don't know, I guess I'm not on like a mailing list or something, because like I said, they're not on Bandcamp, so I don't get those emails. And just so, if I just so happen to see, I don't think they do a ton of PR either. Like, I don't feel like you're seeing like interviews and articles about their bands.
No, not as much.
Which is disappointing, because they have like a really great catalog. Like, they have a ton of amazing records.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're happy to put out a couple of releases a year and keep it going as a small kind of boutique label.
Yeah,
which is cool. We need more of that.
Yeah,
I'm glad they're still around. And maybe I'm just not as tuned in as I once was, but I just get the sense that there are fewer and fewer labels doing that kind of thing. And certainly there's a logistic aspect to it. It's not I'm trying to think if I ever paid more than $5 for a Salinas 7-inch, and I remember it being like not a big deal because I think people deserve to get paid for their art. But I remember forever Salinas albums were $8, and then they were $10, and then all of a sudden they were $15. I don't know if they've gone up since then, but yeah, I mean that's just labels having to grapple with the increased costs of production and things like that. And so it's, there are, I think, comparatively fewer bands now putting out 7-inches than there were a decade ago. But yeah, I mean, we're kind of getting off track from Martha. But Salinas is an important label, and I'm glad that they have had a part in bringing Martha to North American audiences. That was definitely my first introduction to the band back in 2014 when Courting Strong came out on Salinas. Salinas for me has just for a long time been a stamp of approval. There have been very few releases from that label that I haven't enjoyed in some way.
So for the very first time I remember seeing the band Martha's Name ever was around, I want to say it was the split they did with Radiator Hospital. It was like a 2015 split.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was probably the first time I heard their name. And then there was a period there where I got them confused with the band Marge, which was John Allison Weiss's band, and like Melissa Brain and like a bunch of other Philly people.
Didn't they also have an album on Salinas?
They did. They have full length on Salinas.
Yeah.
So I was always like, is that band? Marge and Martha, in my brain, I was like, which band is that? And I could never remember which one it was. And I think Martha overtook Marge in the collective conscious, because I don't think Marge has really been active in years.
I don't think so either.
Which is fine because it wasn't really their main output anyway. So yeah, I remember you talking about them quite a bit, telling me how much you like them and how I should listen to them. And like, I've definitely listened to, I was trying to remember, like, have I listened to an entire record by them? I probably have. I want to say I listened to the last full length in its entirety when it came out, kind of at your urging. But for whatever reason, I didn't like crack that, like, maybe because when I listen to it in the year, because the later in the year it gets, the less repeat listens I get out of things.
Right.
And so like logically in my head, I'm like, this is a good band. Martha is a good band. But like for some reason it never like makes their way into my actual like rotation.
Okay. So what do you think of this album then?
So I think that this is one of those records that if I look at their discography, it's the one that I go, that's the one I know, because it's like the most recognizable album cover, and it's the one I feel like got kind of the most attention. And listening to it, I'm like, okay, this lives in that world of like The Measure or Reviver or what was the other one I thought of too? Caves. What kind of Caves was doing a little bit before here. So it's like this lower-fi, I guess, kind of punky stuff. Like the production's not glossy. It's very I'm not gonna say it's rough sounding, but it's definitely more. It just feels DIY. Like that's how it feels to me. Like, and all those bands do too.
Yeah.
And to me, it feels like they picked up kind of where Reviver left off, because I want to say that's around the same time when they kind of like slowed down and were even done, maybe even by 2016. Or maybe like was like a single or something around that time period. But I definitely was like, okay, they were picking up where some of those bands kind of left off. And also now knowing what's coming out of England currently, like I definitely see that they kind of helped lay the groundwork for a lot of the UK like DIY bands now, like a Fresh or like a band like Nervous or somebody like a lot of the Specialist Subject bands, which I think their newest record's on Specialist Subject too.
Yep. So
that totally makes sense in my brain. Like that's the right scene and everything. So it's definitely in a style of music that I like from then that I still like to this day. We talk about this all the time whenever like you're sending me music.
I know what's coming.
You're always like, all right, what didn't you like about this? And my response is almost always, I didn't like the vocals.
Yeah.
But
you have 4 to choose from. You have 4 vocalists to choose from.
Yeah, but I think that one is the one that sings most of the songs. Is that Daniel?
Are you talking about the one that opens the album with Christine?
Yeah.
Daniel is I don't know. Maybe it's Yeah, it's probably he probably sings most of the songs on the album.
I think it's Daniel because I looked up the band they were in prior.
Yep.
Osnid?
Onsint, yeah, Onsint. He and Nathan are also in Onsint together.
Yeah, and Naomi was in that band too.
And Naomi sometimes plays in that band, yeah.
And it seemed like Daniel was the main singer in that band, and it's the same singer, so that's why I was like, okay, I think that's Daniel, because they credit everyone as vocalists, and so it makes it a little harder to be like, who's singing now, though? Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's just something about, I like the melodies.
Okay.
I like the harmonies and like all of the like.
Daniel can shred. Daniel can shred too.
I like the guitar work.
He's the shredder in the band.
Like, I like literally every like aspect of this band.
Yeah.
It's just the vocal like tone or quality. It's a higher voice that just kind of, it hits that. I feel like in my brain I have like that, like an operation board, and if it hits just too close to it, it does that like buzz. Because like I really love like Naomi's vocals on here. I can't tell if the other two have leads. They
do, yeah. So let me just take a look again at the track listing here. Probably the other notable track on here is track 7, Ice Cream and Sunscreen, and JC sings Ice Cream and Sunscreen.
Yeah, that was that's kind of like their most, like I looked at like their Spotify and Last FM, and it's like one of the most listened to songs, if not the most listened to song from this album.
Yeah, and then Nathan is a singing drummer, and I don't remember if he has any lead songs on this album, but he does come in. He's in Precarious, and then he sings one of their other more popular songs from their first album called 1967. I Miss You, I'm Lonely.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Ice Cream and Sunscreen like being one of their most popular songs, or like, and it was one of my least favorite songs on the record.
What are you talking about?
My least favorite is St. Paul's Westerberg Comprehensive. Just because, I don't know. I don't care about the replacements. I really don't care about the replacements. And it's like an all acoustic song. And Ice Cream and Sunscreen is like a half acoustic song. So maybe that's what it is. I don't like the acoustic elements of their.
Justin, what are you doing to me? Okay, but okay, what I think, I mean, this is a moot argument for you because you don't like the vocals, but what I think that they do perfectly, and they do everything in between perfectly too, but what Martha does perfectly is opening and closing tracks. And so the album like is off with a bang, like just a little bit of feedback and then straight into Christine, like just like crashing drums. And then you're right, like Daniel is at the top of his register right off the bat. But I think that's such like a beautiful, powerful way of opening the album. And then it's a loop. The album's a loop tied together by the feedback outro in St. Paul's Westerberg Comprehensive. Yeah, that feedback just loops right back into Christine.
Is Martha have members in that band Mirex?
No.
Oh, why did I think that? Must be some other members of that band.
Yeah.
They did that loop thing too. They got on my nerves, but this one did. I didn't really recognize that they had done that, and I don't think you would unless you like played it from the beginning immediately after. But
right.
Okay. I when I do these episodes, I try and come in with this. I try and wipe away as many like preconceived notions and opinions I have on records, so that I can give them kind of like a fresh take, like and view it as for what it is exactly. Okay. So like maybe prior to this, I would have been like, meh, not for me. Right. And like listening to it again, I'm like, this has so many elements of things that I absolutely love and enjoy. And I do have like, how many songs on here that I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4 like truly excellent songs that I like. I really loved these songs.
Okay.
So I wanted to talk about the positives because in all reality, even though I don't necessarily like the tone of his voice, the songs are really well done and really well written and really well performed.
Yeah. So, and maybe what's interesting about that is like, I like hearing how you're tracing their sounds, through the UK DIY scene and through maybe things like Reviver. I would be curious to, they're not here to defend themselves, but I would be curious to put that to them because I don't necessarily think that they would make those same connections. And maybe something else that I really love about them, and And if I have any kind of measure of criteria for why I think they're the best band in the world, maybe this is one of them. I'm putting this together in real time. They take their influences, and from my perspective, they really create something new. And their influences are fairly wide and varied. I don't think they would call themselves a punk band. I think that they've kind of variously described themselves as a power pop band or an indie pop band or an indie punk band. They're not saying that they're not in any way a punk band, but I don't think that's how they would, firstly describe themselves. But for me, when I listen to them, I hear things like, and these are all things that they've talked about as influencing them, but I hear things like the Markmen, who are another band that I don't think you really like the Markmen, but
actually I do. I've only recently got into them. Like I just didn't really know their material prior to this.
Yeah, because the Markmen do something really cool with a genre that like I don't care about. I don't care about garage rock. I don't care about garage music. I don't care about it at all. But the Markmen are able to kind of rise above most of what I find really boring about garage rock. And I don't know, I haven't thought enough about the Markmen and how they do that to really be able to describe that. But I hear the Markmen in Martha, and they've covered Markmen before. And then I hear also though, like I hear Sarah Records. I hear like this long history of British, wimpy twee indie pop. I hear things like the Exploding Hearts in their guitar tone. They've talked about this band. Oftentimes, I'm sure you do this too. When you see one of your favorite bands talking about one of their favorite bands, you'll try and go back and listen to that to try and connect the dots. I haven't been able to make this band click yet, but they've talked about this British band, The Beautiful South, a lot. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe someday, 10 years into the distance, it'll make sense to me. But
yeah,
I can hear it. I can hear it in their music. It's just The Beautiful South themselves haven't clicked for me. And so it's interesting to hear what you hear and how you're trying to kind of wrap your head around the sound and where it emerged from and compare that to what I hear.
Yeah, I read their list of comparison, like their influences, and I do think that they do what you said, where they take their influences and they don't sound exactly like them. They do their own thing with it. I think it's not so much that they are influenced by Reviver, but I think it's that they maybe have the same influences as Reviver. Like Billy Bragg is supposedly a really big influence on them, and I get that element for sure. Like Replacements and Big Star, like I see those influences on this record, and I do hear them, but I also hear those influences in those other bands I mentioned. So
sure.
I think it's more like a parallel thinking thing where they came to like a roughly similar sound.
Yeah.
I will say Martha does feel distinctly British or UK.
You can't hide that accent.
Yeah, and they have a Northern English accent, which is one of my favorite accents in music because like Leatherface is like from roughly the same area, and they have a very similar one.
Leatherface is from Sunderland, right?
Yeah, which I think
it's about an hour away from Durham.
Yeah, they're like fairly. They're of the northern side of things. Like Bear Trade is another band who's from Sunderland, and they actually put out a record the next year on Dirt Nap too. So like I love when an accent comes through on a record because so very often in like I don't know, like I feel like in the 80s and the 90s, like these British artists were very much hiding their accents when they were singing. I don't know if it's just like the way they approached singing in general or the style of music they're playing, but like I love when I hear an accent in music. It's like any accent in all reality. Like I love like hearing a southern artist with a southern drawl in their music, but they're maybe not like a country musician, Yeah,
I mean, I think what it does is it really ties you to a particular place, or it ties an artist to a particular place in a particular context. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I'm making this connection, but I'm thinking about something else that Martha does really well, in addition to just this coming through in the way they actually sing, which is something they can't help because of their accents, but they ground their music in such a particular place, both in the way that it sounds and both the lineage that they're kind of following, but also, and I don't know if you picked up on this, just the use of proper nouns in their music. There's very specific names and places that like they'll sing about their friends, or they'll sing a song. Christine is about Christine from the band Milky Wimpshake, a British indie pop band, or is named after Christine from Milky Wimpshake. Sorry. So yeah, they're really grounding these songs in particular times and in response to particular people and places, and yeah, that comes through in the way they sing as well, as much in the way that they sing as what they're singing about.
Yeah, there's definitely like there's something about whenever you are very specific in a song.
Yeah.
It to me hits me harder than something that's just really vague. Like
yeah, there's a specificity to the imagery of the lyrics, and I don't know if you spent any time with their music videos, but they like to have a lot of fun with their music videos, but they're often, you can tell that they're just filmed in, what I'm assuming is Durham.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
October, the last time that we spoke. Though I think about you, I decided that it's safer where we left it, safer for us both. That stuff was a million years ago. When you got accepted, I went loopy, hoping you'd be on my team. When you got accepted, I was totally ridiculous. We were the ones who always got awkward, socially cornered, and I still feel safe. Sit down in the locker, like what does it matter? It's not what I'm after anyway. I will take a compliment.
Yeah, because there's just, I don't know. I understand the desire to write a song in a way that where you're like, I want to have like a universal kind of experience, but I don't know. I feel like specificity is something where it's like, well, I don't have a friend Christine, but I have a friend who's similar to Christine, and like that makes it,
Right.
that makes it stick better to me personally.
Yeah, I like hearing you sing a song about your friend Christine.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they know Christine.
Right.
This is in my notes, and I can rephrase it if you need me to. But there's a connection to one of the songs. What's the horniest chore? Because my answer is grocery shopping.
Why that one?
Because the grocery store is just like, it's like the perfect place to fall in love with a stranger.
It's like, oh, they're looking at the vegan section.
And I love the song Precarious.
Yeah.
Was that on your list of songs you liked?
So that one was on the next tier down. So like I kind of, my four really big ones, Chekhov's Hangnail.
Yeah.
I really loved that one. It kind of starts with this like almost like Iron Chic style guitar intro.
So that's interesting though, because that's JC singing, but he's also singing toward the top of his register. Interesting.
So like I can't really tell a ton of difference in JC and Daniel's voice. But maybe that is the difference, because I like Chekhov's Hangout more than I like Christine. I don't dislike Christine, but I like Chekhov's Hangout better. So then tell me who else does these other ones. So I really enjoyed Goldman's Detective Agency.
That's JC.
So maybe I'm finding out what it is. I like the awkward ones a lot.
I think that's Daniel.
That has a lot of that one had like a 90s alt rock feel to it to me.
Yeah, it's kind of slower.
Yeah.
Yeah, little Gin Blossoms.
And then Curly and Raquel, I like that one too.
That's Daniel too. You like a Daniel song.
Yeah. But in my notes I said, "Oh, that singer's back." I don't know what it was. I think I was really interested in the guitar work on that song, and that's why. And
the melody and the story in that song too, connecting it also. So again, just like tracing lineages here. There's a Billy Bragg reference in there, where toward the end where they're all singing "Celebrate My Love for You" with a stick and poke tattoo, or and then there's another part, "Celebrate My Love for You" with a stick and poke and an iron brew. Is a nod to Billy Bragg. But also written, not about, but named after characters from Coronation Street.
Yeah, I knew it was a Coronation Street reference. I saw that referenced.
There are two that I can recall, probably more, but two moments that I can recall where I've cried in public seeing a band. The first was during the last Measure set at Fest, And the second was seeing Martha twice in the same day in June of 2018. I saw them at an outdoor afternoon show and then at an evening show at a little club in Ottawa I don't think it's around anymore, but it's called Babylon, and I saw a lot of very important shows there. And it was during that last part of Curly and Raquel where they're all singing together. Just couldn't keep it in anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so incredibly happy. I was with my best friend and my wife, and it had just been like a really good day. I was, seeing my favorite band in the world, and yeah, it just came out of me at that moment.
That's a fun type, because it's like there's definitely been times where I was just like more overwhelmed with like positive emotion, and then like you get that like that spicy eyes, misty little bit of like not like a full cry, but you're definitely moist around the eyes for just because you are so happy, because I even feel it in like your chest whenever you get that kind of like the fun feeling. And I think I've had similar experiences as far as like seeing bands live. Just like I don't know, like seeing the Stiff Little Fingers at Fest. Yeah, they were a band, one of my all-time favorite bands. I never actually expected to ever see them live. I knew they were toured, but like they were just like at that point where it's like they're a lot older. They may, who knows, they may stop touring one day. And I just never really even imagined a chance to see them live, and that was one that I was like a positive one. But then there's like negative ones, like seeing Iron Sheik the first time after their guitarist passed away.
Right.
And, they did like the moment of silence.
Yeah.
Like that was hard. And then I saw Bob Mould like the week after the 2016 election. Mm-hmm. And it was just like Bob was furious, about Trump basically. Yeah. And the Republicans, and he was just went off from the stage, and that was another one. So those are more like the negative sides, but definitely had a few emotional moments at live shows.
I think it's important that we have music to I'm not saying anything significant here, but I think it's important that we have music to kind of connect to these particular moments. When I say that Martha is the best band in the world, I want to be careful in saying that that's not, I know right now that's not going to be how I feel forever. That, if I can think back over, I don't know, maybe the last 15 or 20 years in my life, and I can think of a couple of periods where, they were marked by really specific attachments to really specific bands. Like for a long time, if you had asked me, I would have said The Measure was the best band in the world. For a time before that, I probably would have said Against Me is the best band in the world. That doesn't mean that that's the best band in the world for everybody. Those are the best bands in the world at those times for me. And I feel really lucky that, for the last, I don't know, however many years since I heard Courting Strong, I guess probably back in 2014 or when it first came out, Martha has felt like the best band in the world, the most important band in the world to me. And so it's just been these, I don't know, music and especially music that I feel really strongly about in this way, that I can follow across years, or that maintain significance across long spans of time. I often think that they're kind of signifiers of particular transitions to different time periods in my life. And I probably first got into Martha when I decided to go to grad school, and that's been this really significant chunk of my life for the last 7 or 8 years. And who knows what happens next and what band comes in to once Martha kind of slips away in my consciousnness. But I trust that there will be another band eventually, and for now I'm grateful that it's Martha.
That makes me curious. So when you think of the best band in the world, you're thinking of them. What is your criteria when you think of that? Are you thinking like?
I have no criteria.
Like, well, the way you're the bands that you're choosing to say that you thought were the best band in the world at the time, were also bands kind of at like the top of their game. So I feel like when you say best band in the world, you're referring to their active, like their current, they're like. In the moment, they are the best band in the world. Whereas, like, say, if I was going to say someone was the best band in the world, I would go based more on like their legacy and like their, like if they've been around for a long time and have a very large output. So you kind of treat it more like a sport in the sense that you're like, they're the best band right now. But
yeah, there's I don't know if this is let's go back to sports talk. I don't know if this is true of hockey, but in basketball, they talk about peak, and there's these peak years. Usually, they're kind of like amorphous on either end, but usually it's like 25 to 31 is when a player hits their peak, and like inside those years, you would expect the player to be just like at the top of their performance. So yeah, I think of. Right now, Martha is the Giannis Antetokounmpo of DIY music.
So I don't know what the peak in hockey is. I imagine it's probably roughly the same as basketball, probably like late 20s to like early 30s.
Yeah.
Because there's like a physical aspect to it as far as like you got to be able to stay fast. But when I think of it in wrestling terms, because I can use that as a reference point, in wrestling, you need a combination of the physical, like I can do these things physically, combined with the experience of putting matches together and like the ring psychology and everything like that. So in wrestling, like the peak age is typically like 35. It's where they're at the point where like physically they maybe not are at their best, but it's like it's like one is going up while the other's going down. So like knowledge and skill, and then when they hit the exact same point, that's when they're like at their best, and that's usually like 35 roughly.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I can keep trying to develop this criteria in real time, but that's probably not going to get anywhere with that necessarily. But I'll say this: what I love the most about Martha, aside from the music, because I can think back to tons of albums that I like. I can find something to listen to at any point in the day. That's not my concern here. My concern when I think about like longevity of a band or the meaningfulness that I attach to an album or the significance of a band or an album, what I love the most about them as a band is, and if this is the first time you're hearing about Martha, I would encourage you to go and listen to their new album, because it really is fantastic. And I think this is maybe most pronounced on their newest album, but it's something that they've talked about in interviews through the years, and it's something that they have. It's certainly something that runs through all of their albums. It's this thread of hope, this hope, while also though honoring like the despair that comes with being alive, and that's something that runs through all their albums, and it's something that I certainly think is present on this album, on Blisters. But they do that in a way that is at once both incredibly earnest, but not being overly romantic. And that's, I think, a really difficult balance to strike. It's part of the reason that I got so burnt out on particular kinds of punk. For me, and this is an amorphous genre in itself too, we can talk about that stereotypical fest punk sound. Mm-hmm. I think stereotypes in some instances exist for a reason. That's not to say that particular sound is representative of all bands in that scene, but I think most people know what I'm talking about when I talk about fest punk. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason that I got so burnt out on that is because it began to feel like almost a parody of itself, where the only topic was, how much of a fuck up the almost always male lead singer is, and how, alcohol and friends is the only thing keeping this particular narrator alive.
Yeah.
That became really, really boring, and it felt forced, and it felt insincere. And I think that Martha moves around that, like they divert around that in a really interesting way by acknowledging both how fucked up things can feel and be, both personally and politically, because they don't only traffic in political, although it's certainly a big part of it. There's a lot personal to it as well. So they acknowledge that, how screwed up things are, and I think that this is kind of an enactment of their ethics and their politics, that there's still a hope for building a better world together. And that earnestness is, I think, really tricky, because it can really quickly slip into what feels like overwrought or impossible to identify with expressions of big feelings or political despair. Or it can be so generic and nondescript to be meaningless, which is what I think I was finding with a lot of the punk that I was listening to, maybe at the time that I found Martha, and what I, still try and stay away from as much as I can.
Yeah, there's lyrically, like, we talked before too in our own conversations about how I'm not a lyrics person in the sense that when I'm listening to music, I don't really pick up on what the lyrics are saying, and so I usually almost always have to go back and read the lyrics later. There's just something about the connection between of what they're saying. I'm more listening to the how and the way things sound versus the actual lyrical content. So I appreciate good lyrics to the point, but I have to go read them to find out if they're good or not. So this one I went and I read like probably the lyrics to the first half of the record, because I was like doing it as I was making my notes, and then like almost in every track I was just like, man, these lyrics, they're really good lyricists. There's a specificity, but you're right, there is a little despair, because I think there was one review that I read that talked about how what county they're from in England was voted to leave during Brexit, and so like it's essentially a more conservative area in England that they live. So, and then like the band themselves describe themselves like as queer, I think, or at least some of the members are, and that they're politically active and politically conscious to a degree that I identify with a way, because I live in North Carolina, which is a red state. We have this weird reputation of not being as bad as the other red states, but we're a strongly red state, and this week's election has proven that. So there was something just a little bit more poignant about reading some of those lyrics, and what I was literally experiencing last night, like reading lyrics, looking at election results, and just being like, that's great. Literally every single person I voted for lost in my state. So by a lot. my friend, I have a good album for you. it's called Please Don't Take Me Back, and it's the new release by Martha.
I was reading another recent interview with them where they kind of talked about how the first album was about growing up punk, and this album Blisters is about staying punk. Their third album was about kind of like about love and experiencing love and being broken by love in different ways, and the new album is about trying to, they have a song called Hope Gets Harder. It's about trying to at least stay politically engaged in ways that keep hope alive while also acknowledging just how truly fucked everything is.
Yeah, like I definitely got that feeling of just being like, futileness to to everything. Like I have a cousin who is trans, and he posted like voted, now we wait yesterday, and then like later in the evening all he said was goodbye rights. And so it was just like just like hit me,
Yeah
and I don't know.
Yeah, it's really heavy. And yeah, that's where sometimes I think the futility of talking about music can hit you when you realize how, I don't know, I feel like I've probably talked about this on the pod before, but I always think back to that old Jeff Mangum interview where he was talking about like why Neutral Milk Hotel fell apart, and it was in part because he and his friends and their hippie collective down in Athens thought that music could save the world, but they made music, and then his friends were still in pain, and it was like this stark realization for him as an adult that like you have to stay engaged, you have to stay active, you have to stay conscious in those ways. I mean, Martha certainly tries to bring that stuff into their live shows, even in little ways. There's a video from, I think I don't know, it must have been from around the time of Brexit, where Nathan had written on his kick drum. They have a song called I Miss You, I'm Lonely. He had written I Miss EU, I'm Lonely.
Yeah.
There's another video. I know we can't really watch videos together, but there's a really, really good video from around this time of them playing live in studio from Old Granada Studios. I don't know if you caught that one. But they do a lot of overhead shots, and on his snare, he'd written Anna Campbell is Immortal. Anna Campbell was a British anarcho-feminist who went to Syria to fight in the women's protection units, and she died in the Rojava, I don't know how to say that word, the conflict in the Syrian civil war. And so yeah, they are outwardly committed to particular leftist politics, and I appreciate that in a world that has, especially in punk, has at times felt like it has drifted towards apolitical subject matter.
Yeah, like I do relate a little bit to that Jeff Mangum comment of basically being like, oh well, we wrote songs about it and it didn't really like help anything,
Yeah.
And to me, I don't think you're gonna change minds with music specifically, but you can have this cathartic output of like, these people are experiencing similar things to me, and it can motivate you in the sense that, well, they're doing it and they're maintaining a forward momentum, not necessarily like a positive attitude, but like an attempt to continue to make things better. And usually you're just singing to the same people who agree with you in a lot of this stuff, but it's an inspiring type of approach to just kind of be like, just don't give up, the efforts,
Yeah. I think that people can often forget that revolution and revolutionary change is often a collection of very small moments, and maybe there might be some kind of big firework to really signify that something is happening, but there's always a build up toward that. And that's what I think listening to Martha in part reminds me of, that there is the kind of everyday work. I read another interview recently where I think it was Nathan who said that we often sing about outsiders, people who kind of feel like they don't fit in, but not in a romantic way. It's a much more mundane form of not fitting in. And for me, that's about just being committed to particular everyday politics. Yeah.
Recording this on a day where they're still like tallying up actual like votes and everything, and Dylan actually said something today. He's like, interesting. Every person I know talks about how in their local elections they lost pretty badly as far as rights and races and stuff like that.
Right.
But then the national narrative is that, oh, big win for Dems, and it's like, but that's not who's hurting people the most. It's the smaller, it's the local. That's where you're like, voting is only one fraction of a thing that actually can cause change. And so you can't just be like, well, I went to the ballot and that's it, and not do anything else.
Yeah, we ought not to hitch all of our futures towards just one isolated act of voting.
Yeah. And so it definitely has to start locally, which depending on where you live, it can feel futile, but definitely. But that's where you can see the most change too. So like you'll have the most luck that way. So.
Do you have any final thoughts about Martha and Blisters in the Pit of My Heart, particularly?
All that I'll say is that I do think it is probably one of the best records in 2016, especially lyrically and what they mean for like sort of DIY music in general. There's a lasting, like a staying power that this record has, whereas like some of the records that I mentioned earlier, I was like, what? No. Why is that up there so high? I really liked it the week I wrote that list, but I agree. They should be one of the biggest bands in the world, which I will say there were a lot of positive reviews when that record came out. Like it had a ton of positive reviews. It was on a couple like best of lists that year. Pitchfork gave it like a 7 point something. There were no negative reviews as far as I could tell. So I think it was, for the people who heard it, it was well regarded. So
yeah, cool. I always appreciate coming on the show and being able to talk about music. I look forward to. I'm just inviting myself to the year end again to to talk about my favorite albums of the year.
Yeah,
I look forward to doing that in a couple weeks. I like what you and Dylan do here with your guests. I like hearing people talk about their own experiences with albums, even if they're albums that I'm not familiar with. And I don't know if I could say one last thing about Martha and why Martha and not only this album. I'm glad we got to talk about this album today because I think it is wonderful, but I think across all their albums, about art and music that maybe this goes back a little bit to our nostalgia discussion from the top of the show, but I think that you should be open to being changed by art. It should art and music and cultural enrichment is important, and that those kinds of experiences, they should make you a better, or at least a different person in some way. One of the reasons that I wanted to talk about Martha is that because I think I'm probably a different person because I have the phrase "blisters in the pit of my heart" in my head. They contributed something to my world that wasn't there before. I'm different. I'm a different person. I'm always a different person, but in part I'm a different person because I've heard Martha, and I've enfolded Martha into my life in certain ways. I'll probably get "blisters in the pit of my heart" tattooed on me at some point. It's a part of me now.
Yeah, it is always nice whenever you do find that like line or a phrase or something like that just like kind of like sticks with you to the point where it's like, oh no, that's like a piece of me now, like it's a part of me. They
do it over and over again. They've done it on 4 consecutive albums and on a myriad of splits and EPs, and yeah, they're a special band.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being part of the show and filling in for Dylan since he couldn't be here.
Have fun with your mom, Dylan.
Definitely, he's gonna be like doing the tour guide thing for the next week. But
cool.
Oh, we want to go to Northern California? Okay, that's a couple hours. So.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. We didn't do any social media plugs or anything like that, but they're all in the show notes. So everybody, you know how the internet works. You know how to Google a podcast. You'll find us. We're on all of them. So
no one's listening an hour and a half in anyway.
Right. It's too late. I lost them.
Everyone's in bed.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.